So we're now in the second half of David's speech, continuing on from the previous chapter. Then King David said to the whole assembly, "My son Solomon, the one whom God has chosen, is young and inexperienced." Now that sentence could be said in one of two possible ways, couldn't it? Either David is being a bit cruel, or he's just being clear. Now, evidently, he's not weaponizing his son's youth and inexperience. He's not trying to undermine people's confidence. He's just trying to be clear. He's a young man. He's obviously never been king of a kingdom before, because David, I've been on the throne. And he's obviously never built a temple before, because literally no one in the world has ever done what we are attempting to do. And yet, don't miss this detail, God is the one who has chosen him, young and inexperienced though he may be. My son Solomon, the one whom God has chosen, is young and inexperienced. David is using this reality as a rallying cry to say, so get behind him. I've done all that I can to support him, and I'm asking you to do the same. From verse 2, with all my resources I have provided for the temple of my God. I have given all these materials, not just out of the kind of national treasury of Israel, but I have emptied my personal bank accounts as well. I now give my personal treasuries of gold and silver for the temple of my God. As we saw in the previous chapter, David was setting the example in submitting to God's plan. Now he sets the example in supporting God's plan, yes, even financially. Well, the people, inspired by his devotion, they do the same. We read that the leaders of the families gave willingly. And in verse 9, the people rejoiced at the willing response of their leaders, for they had given freely and wholeheartedly to the Lord. David, the king, also rejoiced greatly. He responds here with a beautiful prayer. There are aspects of this prayer that are carried forward into the New Testament. Some of this language will be very familiar to you through benedictions and doxologies that are often said at the end of a church service. We'll read the prayer through in its entirety before we make a couple of quick observations. David praised the Lord in the presence of the whole assembly, saying, "Praise be to you, Lord, the God of our father Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power, and the glory and the majesty and the splendor, for everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all. Wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things. In your hands are strength and power to exalt and give strength to all. Now, our God, we give you thanks and praise your glorious name." David here is acknowledging that any strength he has is a gift from the God who is infinitely strong. Any wealth he has is a gift from the God who is infinitely wealthy. Any authority he has is a gift from the God who is the ultimate authority. All we have comes from him. And if we really believe that, then it changes what we do with the resources that we have been given. It means that even in your generosity, you are not permitted to become proud and arrogant and self-exalting, because, rightly understood, we are simply giving back to God only a fraction of what he first gave us. Listen to this language that David uses. This is so helpful for us. Who am I and who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? Just imagine the masses of wealth that the people have brought together and consecrated for the construction of the temple. This huge mound of precious materials. And David immediately turns his eyes to God and says, "Wow, how generous have you been to us, God, that we are able to give this back to you." And he's right, isn't he? That all this abundance that we have provided for building you a temple for your holy name, it comes from your hand and all of it belongs to you. You can't outgive God. Why? Because he is abundantly and extraordinarily generous. Have you recognized the generosity of God in your life? If the answer is no, it's because you've got your spiritual eyes shut. See how generous he has been. He so loved the world that he gave even his own son, the most precious thing he had. That is why you can't outgive God, because he already gave his son for your salvation. All that you have now, physically and spiritually, is a gift from him. which ought to leave us full of gratitude and glad generosity that we have the privilege of being put in the position where we can use some of what we have to help others, and so please the God who gave these things to us in the first place. At the end of this chapter, David closes his eyes in death, and then, as we know, opens his eyes in everlasting life. And the amazing thing is that the world he would have woken up in would make this one seem like it was a scrap heap. He has just come from a scene of extraordinary worldly wealth, and yet he wakes up in a world where the streets are paved with gold, surrounded with such extraordinary, everlasting, otherworldly splendor that it would make the palaces of this world look like crumpled up crisp packets compared with the glory that is to come. Why? Well, because God is extraordinarily generous, and he shares what he has with us.